Welcome to Isn't It Obvious, where things are obvious. That's going to be the intro.
Isn't it obvious that this administration has had the most abhorrent response to a pandemic an administration could have?
And for context, because apparently we'll need context, but probably not.
Oh, no, we won't.
This is the Trump administration. And it
I don't
is
know.
spring of 2020, and we are in the midst of a global pandemic in which hundreds and thousands of people are going to die.
I'm going
if they haven't already.
Argue that it isn't obvious because his approval ratings have nothing but improved.
I don't know.
Because
whose scale is this?
Yeah, exactly. From who? Like, what are the sources?
So,
is it Fox News polls? Because I won't trust that. Is it CNN?
I think it's 538 that said that his numbers of job... no, it was a very particular question about how he's handling the COVID-19 pandemic. And
he's not.
I think it was something like 43% or something like the view it that he was doing a not just like a good job, but like a very good job sort of thing. Like he's doing.
I still highly question wherever they were gaining that information from.
Well, this is why I don't think it's obvious, because either A, like someone is trolling me, or B, people actually think that this administration is doing a good job. And
I think it's more the former than the latter.
Well, that's the thing, is that like clearly anybody who is living during this time would be like, wow, all of this is extremely messed up and completely avoidable. And yet now we're in this goddamn quagmire.
I mean, not even so much completely avoidable. Like, it was going to come here at some point. But how they responded to it.
Yeah, you could mitigate so much more than what we've done. We could have done way more than we've done.
He could have implemented the, what was it, Parkinson's Act? Parker Act? Whatever, where the president can force companies to produce wartime material. In air quotes, basically. He could have implemented that in February.
Yeah, he could have.
And then all of these things would be available now instead of now he's implementing it, so they'll be available in June.
Which is only going to be helpful when the pandemic resurfaces in September.
Right, but even with that, all of this production goes away. He, being the great businessman he is, will sell it to other countries that aren't dealing with it, or they're getting their waves, and then we as Americans won't have it, and we'll have to buy it back.
Yeah,
at double the cost of what probably we sold it to.
I hope that doesn't happen.
It's gonna be some type of bullshit like that. Can
he just get infected?
No, look, I don't think that would be good.
And not have a ventilator.
I mean, he's never gonna wear a mask, so.
If the head of state is infected, that would be like.
I mean, Boris Johnson's affected. And he's fine, unfortunately.
He was in self-quarantine with potential. And Angela Merkel has toilet paper and 4 bottles of wine.
But that's not excessive. I feel like 4 bottles of wine is a perfect amount.
For the weekend?
I mean, for like a week, maybe. Maybe 4 days. Like, you could do a bottle of wine a day.
You could easily do a bottle of wine a day. I think that's
you can.
I had a bottle of scotch last me 2 days, and I was like...
I prefer to share it with someone, but yes, you could, in theory, do a bottle of wine a day and be fine.
But it's a matter of... It's not just...
Like, honestly, she's going pretty easy. I would have bought probably 7.
She's
in fact, I'd probably just gone a case, like,
they
straight
had
out 12.
restraint. That was just, like, the whites she was missing from her collection.
You're right.
It's not necessarily just Trump's response to it. It's Azar also not taking it as the department head at HHS. It's Secretary of State. Pompeo. Yeah, Mike Pompeo. Also, not handling this well from, like, a diplomatic standpoint. It's not just, like, Trump himself is shitting the bed, but everyone in his whole administration is also shitting the bed.
Yep.
And
like ordering us to betray our allies. Like, yeah, no, they're ordering us to betray our allies to stop manufacturers from sending necessary resources overseas or to our neighbors. Hello, Canada.
Mm-hmm.
Even though, like, there's no sense in making enemies right now. Like, we're all in this together.
But we're not, because capitalism. I know, and that's the proper reaction.
My thoughts on this is that it's really not. I mean, yeah, there's a lot of things that the administration has done. Like, I would say,
capitalism is great when everything's great. It's not so great when everyone's fucked.
Very terribly done. Like, one of the things that I find very infuriating is, like, we tested more people than all the other countries. And I'm like, that is not because of you. That is despite of you. Like, isn't it obvious that anything that you're doing that's a positive thing is because it was done against you? Because if it was up to him, New York wouldn't be able to test as many of their constituents because New York decided to circumvent the CDC guidelines, right? And just started doing it anyway so that they can get the test done instead of going to a certain lab to get the results. And more governors had followed that sort of trailblazing attitude rather than waiting for the federal government saying, no, you can't do it. They're like, we're going to do it anyway, right? And then,
yeah, well, sometimes like that's what you got to do,
right?
Like, if your leadership sucks, you just
they're like, well,
do your job. You do your job.
Like, there's a thing to be said about gubernatorial leadership superseding presidential leadership.
The issue, though, is
not to stamp the libertarian thing, but like, what DeSanto has done in Florida is absolutely worse than what
Cuomo is doing in New York
or California.
Right. I mean, you got to keep in mind our neighbors to the east of us of Wisconsin, right? They decided to stay at home, maybe 5 days before Minnesota decided to do that, right?
But I mean, that was after like 50 cases in Chicago popped up.
Right. I mean, that makes sense. They're so close, especially Milwaukee only being like, less than an hour away.
I mean, it's basically a suburb of Chicago.
At this point, yeah.
No.
But I do think that, like, this is where libertarianism falls apart, is when it comes to paying the piper for externalities, libertarian doesn't have a solution to this.
Exactly.
And that's where, like, the entire philosophy and mantra of, like, well, I could do whatever I want. It's like, yeah, but in cases where your actions create more ripples and waves for other people, and no one is going to hold you against those things because they're an externality in sense of an economic view. Like, now this is about game theory, and you're on the losing side, like everyone is. Like, because now you're going to be spreading the disease faster, and now everyone's going to get sick, and then we have the situation we have here. And my real thought about me not blaming the administration more than I already have, like, this is, I like went in with my introduction here about like, here's a few things I agree with, like that they completely did a terrible goddamn job. But I will say that the counter argument here is that people just terribly suck, right? So like you have Florida saying, look, we're going to finally start doing things even though it's way too freaking late because spring break has already happened. Like, you can already see people even walking around the suburbs of Minneapolis, St. Paul, not following these guidelines at all. It's kind of a hard thing to tell people, look, you have to stay at home, stop going to the beaches, stop going to public areas.
But at the consequence of what is the argument against that? Where if Florida implemented the stay at home at the height of spring break, which is a huge money-making opportunity for them, would it not be better to take that 2-week pause, hard break, and then rebuild after that instead of having whatever the 4,000 newly confirmed cases that have sprung up in that state?
But Micah, it's basically the flu, and it'll be fine. You know, like no one's gonna die from it. Yeah. We'll be okay. It's basically the flu. That's what they told us.
Right.
But who is they in this situation?
That's what I'm saying. The Trump administration.
Is the they the federal level that's supposed to,
to tell us
steer the ship that
actually
is America?
Like, get us the actual information that's true and get it out to all of us so we can prepare and all be on the same page and all know what we're fucking doing.
I'm not that convinced that this is going to actually work. Like, even if we had a competent administration, like, let's say it's, I don't know, I'm trying to think of someone that was okay. I'm going all the way back to Eisenhower here. Like, like I'm just trying to, like, list the presidents of, like, which one did I actually think was...
Going back to Eisenhower.
Well, let's say it was a
How about
Republican.
Hoover?
I'm trying to think of a Republican president that I agree with.
Oh,
and it's
Republican.
like, nope. Okay, it's all the way down. Eisenhower's probably the last one. And not like 100% endorsing like a ringing agreement. Just kind of like, yeah, I guess like I like the freeway system. Anyway, even if they said, look, we're going to handle this competently and we're going to tell you that this is not just a flu, but this is very serious, and 1% of the population may die from this, which is like equivalent to 3 million or so people here.
A lot of people.
Which is more than what our crematoriums can handle 24/7, right? Like we're going to have to put bodies in ice rinks because we just cannot burn the bodies fast enough. Mm-hmm. Like if they went ahead and started saying stuff like that, like I'm still under the impression that people are going to still do stupid things. Like, because it's not...
That's a bit of social Darwinism, though.
No, but, like, it's not like people don't have access to what's happening to Italy and Spain, right? Like, they don't... It's not like they haven't seen what was happening.
Yeah, but it's not here, and they don't matter.
Right, so it's...
That's the thought process.
So even if the administration said, look, this is really serious, guys, like, lots of people are going to die unless we start to act together as a nation... And people are going to be like, well,
maybe
if
he was like a competent leader who could, I don't know, inspire people to, take whatever he says seriously, not lie to the nation.
But, okay, genie's out of the bottle at this point, right? Because he did lie, and he just said it was a hoax and all this other stuff. Now that it's present day, you can have probably 1,000 deaths a day, and that's going to be trivial. By next week is going to be 2,000 and more and more so. Like at this point, alarm bells should be ringing to everybody. Like, oh shit, this is real, and that still hasn't happened yet, right? Like, at what point is there going to be an alarm? And you see these press conferences with the MyPillow guy and with Dr.
Let's keep it serious here.
Okay, but you still have the idea that you can see this administration playing catch-up, right? Like, he's seriously going to consider doing marching orders and making all medical device companies, like, force majeure, which already these things are destroying our supply chains as I speak. Anyway.
Right, yeah. There are a whole lot of other issues, which goes back to my point that the administration has handled it the worst possible way you can.
Stupidest way he could have.
Yes.
Like, we could have avoided even having these marching orders, really.
Right.
They would have been marching orders in February, and they'd be done by March, and we'd have the impact over March instead of dealing with the beginning.
And we wouldn't have needed to require as many companies to make these things for us as quickly or as much. Because we would have flattened the curve sooner.
Yeah, but
before this. 15 cases or whatever he was saying back in February.
It'll go away in early...
It'll go away and it'll be 0.
But I don't...
Except it wasn't.
I really don't think that this would have went well with the... Like, let's say it's a Barack Obama presidency and that he's competent and that he is competent. I'm just saying that...
He would have probably taken advice from his freaking...
Right. And let's say in January, he saw the writing on the wall and he's like, okay, well, we're going to start doing travel restrictions, travel bans. We're going to start saying that import-exports are going to be reduced, right? Or we're going to actually start to say if you're from these countries, you're not allowed in. We're going to say that if you're
Fox
coming...
would be like, this president's killing business.
Right.
Do you remember Ebola in Obama's presidency?
Well, the difference
Fox
between
News,
Ebola...
Well, I mean, it's a more aggressive disease, but there were only 2 deaths stateside. Only 2.
Yes.
And Fox News was acting like it was the goddamn apocalypse.
Right. I remember that time where someone had been suspected of having Ebola and decided to go to like a concert or something like that, and he was like saying, "Well, I have constitutional rights. You can't just confine me, right?" And there was actually like a legal discussion happening of like, wait a minute, what happens? How can we detain someone? Is habeas corpus suspended? Right.
No,
now
it
doesn't matter. Everyone.
No. Well, like I heard a thing at one of the last days last week where the federal government was considering enacting that people threatening to spread COVID could be treated as terrorists, and that blew my goddamn mind.
Yeah, that's
this is not good. Like, I can imagine if this was like a President Barack Obama administration, like that would be considered. Well, wow. That's extreme overreach.
Oh,
like, who is saying...
aggressive.
That's overreach even under the Trump administration.
Yeah, for some reason, like, Republicans get a pass when they do overreach. Like, I
Yeah.
don't know why it is. They just do.
Because
Like-
they are the stereotypical politicians that always break the law and abuse it to their power, and yet people
But
still
it's
vote for
okay
them.
because it's in their interest.
Yeah.
So it's fine.
I just don't quite get that. Like, wait, it's the same thing. Like,
Yeah.
you're still... Like, just wait 4 years, guys, and then it's going to be the blue party, and you're not going to like it when you just giving them the keys to everyone's web access and encryption. But it's okay because right now I'm short-sighted, and it's the red party. So, they understand that seats change power, right? Like, okay, anyway.
Right, which is why the whole 50-vote thing is going to bite them in the ass. And
Right, just like if...
this year or in 2 years, I think there's a lot of Senate seats that could flip.
Well,
so the next midterm is going to be big.
My wonderful mother-in-law was like, "Oh man, I can't wait to like vote this buffoon out of office." And I was like, "Do you think there's going to be voting?"
There's a lot more.
And she's like, what do you mean? I'm like, "You actually think we're going to be voting in November?" Like I'm going to put like a bet that we're not going to be voting if this continues.
Oh,
like,
no.
actually, I'll just say that
we had an
They'll
election
be
during the
remote
goddamn Civil
voting.
War. We'll have an election during this. If not, then Trump needs to be booted out for treason.
Well, who's going to stop him? Like,
The
if he said, "Look,
so
I'm
the
going
main
to
benefit."
Someone will fucking stop him.
Really?
Someone will
should have
stop him.
stopped him
The
like
main
3
benefit of
train
the Black
stations
Plague
ago.
in Europe was that the working class was able to establish that they had
Here we
equal
go,
rights,
revolutionary.
or some rights, to the wealthy gentry that was running medieval society. And that was the collapse of monarchies and that type of government systems, because the working class knew they had rights, because all of a sudden their shit became necessity for the rich people to keep being rich. That's a similar thing that we're going through now.
Except for you have half the population being totally in favor of suspending voting, right? Like,
What?
But that's not half the population. That's half of
God, I hope not.
the whatever survey that people took. That's not half the
I
population.
will wear a hazmat suit or something to go to the polls.
You guys are not
man.
like the regular people that they would sample for.
Right, but
is
that
the president
is the issue,
or is
because there are more people like us that have this sense, and we won't partake in Rasmussen poll because we know the bullshit that they are.
I'm going to just say that one thing is I don't really benefit from any of the primary candidate of Bernie Sanders. And yes, I'm going to input him here, even though it's not really part of COVID-19 discussion. But I wasn't like going to benefit a lot from his policies. But I wanted him in there because it makes a lot of goddamn sense to have Medicare for all, right? Like, again, I would be for
a hospital system that was, I don't know, federal and able to communicate their need, based on location, and have a good system in place where they had a log of all of the equipment and stuff they had available, and everyone would just know that information. Everyone would just know it.
Saying that based off the policies of what the Democratic Party had to offer, Elizabeth Warren and Bernie Sanders' policies would be very beneficial in times of, like, I don't know, a fucking pandemic.
No,
so
they just be beneficial.
Or just beneficial, period, right,
yeah.
for most events. And so I'm like, look, this isn't really going to benefit me too much, but, like, it just will be the right thing to do. So why shouldn't I go out and vote? So, I grab the kids, I go there, and I say, look, I would like to cast my vote for the primary in Minnesota for Bernie Sanders. Is that possible? And they're like, oh, yeah, look, you meet these requirements, go ahead. Mm-hmm. And so they're like, all right, cool. The problem I have is that no one else fucking did, right? And I'm like, what the fuck, guys? Like, I don't really benefit for helping everyone else that really needs this fucking shit, a.k.a. everybody else. Mm-hmm. But, like, you guys don't even fucking bother to get off your asses to go in a line. By the way, 0 fucking wait, right? And to be like, oh, wow, I should actually vote for the person that, could really benefit me from a economic fiscal sense, right? Like, not just like, oh, I like him as a cult leader, or a moral sense, just like, this is in my best financial interest to do so. And they don't even fucking get out of their couches. At that point, I felt like Warcraft 3, where Arthas is like, you know what? I'm going to go to the dark side now. Like, I tried my best to fucking help you guys, but if you guys can't even bother to fucking help yourself, then why should I? Right? Like, why should I go against my own interests to help you fuckers if you can't even vouch for yourself? And then the guy turns into a Lich King. Like,
because that's what being a Democrat means.
Okay, so long story short,
we deserve what we get, man.
It's not exactly Trump's. It is his fault for what all the management is based off like ownership, right? But like the whole system is fucking rotten. Like the fact that you have lost your insurance if you don't have a job, but so you're not going to go to get tested because you don't know if it's going to be really covered or not. But then you still need to go out, and you know what? You feel pretty fine because you're a youngish person. So why not just roll the dice, right? Like this whole system is so.
I really, in a society where people like care about their careers and are planning to stick around in that company for 10 years or more, having insurance through a company in that case makes sense. But like, we don't do that as much anymore. And you know what? Companies don't really care that much about their employees. They really don't. Like, some do, especially smaller ones.
They provide because they had to because of ACA.
Yeah. Well,
it is not a good...
How about the fact that I work for a medical company, and I won't name which, but I have to end up paying like $10,000 for the birth of my kid.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And it's like, okay,
that seems,
with insurance that I already have to pay like a small princely fortune for, like ransom. Yeah. I'm like...
Wouldn't you rather just pay like a flat 10% more, and then you don't have to worry about that?
Okay, so in my brain, I'm thinking like I'm not a. Hopefully, my employers or future employers won't listen to this.
3M's not listening to this. You're fine.
I am not a smart man, right? But I can clearly see that I would save fucking a ton of money if I would just pay some taxes versus paying a middleman a fuck ton of money. Like to me, this budget doesn't matter. I don't care if it goes to one hand or the other. Just I want to pay less and have more like service. Which one does that? No. It happens to be the federal level of any other fucking civilized country. Let's do that. And the reason why I bring this up is because this shouldn't take that much of a leap of reason, and yet, like, there's only like maybe 1 out of 10 people who agree with this theory. So when it comes to Trump, right, and he says something like, "Look, I may have gotten a bad hand, or like as far as playing poker, like I don't see that that's wrong." Like the whole...
Hey, what? Break that down a little bit more.
But the idea of like, okay, that our healthcare system is fraudulent, essentially, right? It's all controlled by insurances, which are essentially death panels at this point. The fact that school buses and cafeterias still have to run to be able to feed hungry kids because school is the only meal they get that fucking day is already a symptom of something already fucking terrible happening. And like, the fact that parents have to go to work because they just need the money because they're living paycheck to paycheck is like, okay, well, you can clearly see that this system that was already taxed to its most limit is just fucking broken on any level of obstacle or like, I don't know, a hiccup, like a pandemic. Like you can clearly see that we were hobbling together with like bits of string and gum. And this is what Trump has to work with. Right, like his only card that he has to play is like,
every president has had to work with that. This is not a new symptom for anything. This is the other point of how Trump has handled this the worst way an administration possibly could. Is he isn't smart enough to cover up the failures of our systems that other presidents have.
And the failures are only fucking like we only feel it when the whole fucking world's on fire. Like. We are in a dry ass like redwood pine forest or something. Not even a redwood forest. Let's be honest. Redwoods are mostly fireproof. We're in a fucking dry ass drought forest, and someone fucking lit a fire, which is the pandemic, and now we are burning to the ground because no one thought, oh, maybe we should, I don't know, figure out a way to manage this fucking flaming dumpster fire we're dealing with before it happened.
Right, so I'm going to have to just throw my hat here and say that in the ring here and say the only one who actually cared about this was Carter, like Jimmy Carter, and he actually had like an environmental boost from Nixon, who started EPA, right? So Nixon started it. Ford came in. People didn't like the fact that Ford pardoned. Carter came in. And at that time, Carter was more of like an everyday guy, even though he was not really. And the point of this story is, like, Americans saw what he wanted to do, and they flat out fucking rejected it. Like, I
disagree with that summation. The Republican Party made a concerted effort to militarize the religious right against Democrats because of what you were saying that Jimmy Carter did. The Republicans fought against that so hard that they basically worked with Jerry Falwell and made the religious right to justify having a Hollywood actor, and I believe he was a Democratic governor of California. I could be wrong about that, but Ronald Reagan was the more Christian choice against a die-hard Baptist Christian Jimmy Carter, who just wanted to do the most for everyone, like Christians should.
So here's why I'm, like, enraged. Is the reason why I bring up all the way to fucking Carter is because he wanted to launch a kind of Medicare for all plan, sort of like public option, back in those days, right? He thought that this was something worthy of doing. He also put solar panels and said that people should wear a sweater during the oil embargo, which people did not like. Anyway, he wanted to do it, and the declining vote was fucking Teddy Kennedy, right?
So Ted Kennedy?
Ted Kennedy voted against it because he wanted to do it himself. Like, as a political move, he wanted to be president. And he primaried Carter in Carter's second term bid. Right? This is unheard of. You usually don't do this to your own fucking ship because it's like you might as well like add dynamite to it too. Like, you don't fucking sabotage your own party. But I'm not really saying that Teddy Kennedy was a terrible senator, but I'm just saying that Carter wanted to do this. His own party fucking betrayed him. And B, his own party fucking betrayed him anyway because they didn't like him for some reason. And that was the last time you had a chance to fucking fix this terrible system. Once it was, like you said, Reagan in there, it's like, well, now all bets are off. It's going to be, Reaganomics from then on. But the thing that bothers the shit out of me is that you've had a candidate, right? Like, or not a candidate, a president that really told it how it was, and at one point could have changed it, and then people voted him out. Like, I'm not saying I blame the American people of that generation for being fucking idiots.
But you're blaming the American
but they were
people.
And so then the natural progression of these idiots voting is going to be Trump. Right? And then people are like, oh my God, I can't believe Trump is such an idiot. It's like, this is on us. Like, we voted for that fucker. Like, I didn't vote for, but as a nation, we did.
Trump is absolutely a symptom of the greater cancer happening in our society.
And the question, like, well, why isn't their administration doing better? It's like, can we all agree that they totally fucked it up? And I'm like, yes, I agree with that. But, like, the fact that the administration didn't really have any more levers left to play. Like, you inherited, essentially, a house of cards. There was no way to handle the medical system as it is today because it's privatized. The fact that many of our, I think it was 1 out of 5 kids go hungry in Minnesota alone. Like, some ridiculous number.
Oh, yeah.
Like, the school buses have to run and drop off supplies so the kids can pick them up so that they can get fed. Like, this isn't a progressive state where you have this problem. I mean, yeah, I agree that he handled it poorly, but he didn't have a lot of levers to press. His only one was to hope that
let's hypothetical this and say if Hillary Clinton won in 2016, would she have the same lack of levers to pull to react to this?
That's a kind of a big what if.
No, but I mean, if
no, that's very valid. I mean, I'm not dealing with the Supreme Court. I'm dealing with the fact that Trump has gutted a lot of federal levels of bureaucracy that need to be there by not filling positions. He has made us weaker and more susceptible to this type of pandemic. And the fact that he has cut over 50% of CDC's budget.
I feel like Hillary Clinton would have definitely been more on top of things, and she would have had better communication, and she would have taken advice from people who knew better than her, and she wouldn't have been like, hey, I'm more popular than anyone else on Facebook right now. She wouldn't have been that asshole who's like more like I have better ratings than football. Like, it's because there's nothing fucking on, Trump. That's because there's nothing fucking on. No, she would have, like, not said those things, and she would have been working with her allies and taking advice from countries who've gotten their shit together and probably implemented some really good plans and said, hey, governors, here's what we'd like to do. Let's work, and then she'd probably have taken charge of, like, companies so states didn't have to bid against each other and divvied up the ventilators as best as she could to the places that needed it most. I don't know. I honestly, hard to say though. This is still a what if scenario.
It's a phenomenal
doesn't
what
exist.
If,
There's
but
no.
You made a very compelling argument of how a competent leader would lead us through this epidemic.
She would have had better communication. She would have been giving us actual information instead of like, it's just a flu. She would have been like, I'm working with the CDC and we are discussing plans to implement and you will hear from me in 2 days on what we're planning to do. Like, instead of this, 15 cases, it'll be fine.
But
they'll be gone by next week.
The daily briefings where he's just arguing with journalists, asking him actual questions that he doesn't want to answer. So he belittles them and doesn't answer it. And
it's
moves
like,
on.
There's a type of people who's, there's some
like
people who would say I'm doing a bad job. Yeah, because you are.
Okay.
You're doing a terrible job. You're not a leader. Anyway, sorry.
I ran out of devil argument sauce. Like, I cannot.
Of course, goddammit,
Hillary
Phil, it's obvious that it's the worst possible executive branch leadership we could have in America is failing at a test that they should not fail at.
Okay. Yes, I agree. I only have one last thing to say for devil's argument is that if Hillary was the president and if, like, this what if machine, if you bear with me, right, there's probably a very strong chance we would be in the Syrian civil war. I had read not her latest book, but the book before that about her just before wanting to start up the campaign for 2016. And in her book, she detailed that she disagreed kind of with the red line approach that Obama had, and that she was very looking forward to having like a no-fly deal back in that time. Now, this seems like 30 decades ago, like this simple conversation I'm having, because who cares about what had happened and what base was bombed, and like that seemed like, I don't know, 500 years ago, really. Mm-hmm. But at that time, that was a flashpoint, and what analysts do believe is that Hillary is very much a hawk when it
absolutely.
comes to
she
war.
Absolutely is.
And some people think that as far as like the political optics is that women have to be hawks for whatever reason. I don't really necessarily agree with this, but it does kind of follow the mantra of that time where you have to...
To 30-year-old Washington, yes. You needed to be very pro-military to gain that type of federal-level seat.
Yes, and you don't want to appear weak, even though soft power is clearly the right approach. Anyway, back in those days, 1 million years ago, when we cared about Syria, and we cared about Russians gassing, or not, Russians supplying
another time.
A dictator with
so innocent.
That's gassing their own people with chlorine bombs? I forgot what it was.
That mustard gas, and Assad used all the shit that he could get from Russia. And
I'm guessing he still is, because that war is still happening.
Yeah. Uh-huh. Yeah.
Right, it's outside the news cycle. Mm-hmm. But Hillary wanted boots on the ground, like that's what analysts believe. The last book before. The 2016 book.
I don't necessarily disagree with that in the sense of going back to good old American imperialism, that we should have had a stronger hand in the Syrian conflict.
Right. I mean, this is a huge, humanitarian goddamn disaster. It's incredibly terrible. And my thought is, imagine being that and this. That's my only argument that I'd have.
But
right?
I would rather be that and Hillary taking care of this than not that and this currently.
But I mean, that's what I'm saying is like this if machine, if it's worst case scenario and Hillary does do no-fly zone back in the day, I'm going to keep on saying 1 billion years ago because that's how it felt.
It was another time, another era.
When dinosaurs roamed, it feels like.
Only a few years ago.
Before the galaxy even formed.
Yeah.
That news cycle would be, I'm just saying worst case scenario, you're talking about the height of the Iraqi war back
But
in like 2003.
that's also under the supposition that if America got involved, the conflict would not be resolved sooner.
The conflict of... Yes, right. I'm doing worst case analysis here because
Like,
that's the best I can do.
Had Hillary been inaugurated in 2017, the Syrian crisis might have stopped mid-2018.
Or it could have been a black hole event where it's going to be just a wonderful time for everybody.
It would have been more of like a Vietnam where it's a proxy between us and Russia.
So I consider that to be like a calamity, right? Like, it's kind of funny because people are giving Trump a hard time with this catastrophe. And I'm like, you rarely ever get lucky to only have one catastrophe at a time, right? Like, it's going to be hurricane season. Like, let's enjoy the fact that you're going to have a pandemic with hurricanes too. Like,
oh yeah,
enjoy that, pal.
Is going to be flooded,
and then
like
wildfires will be just in time to round off that season.
That's fine. Nobody cares about California anyway. Next time on Isn't It Obvious?
Australia.
California. Does America need it?
Does California matter? Yes, it does. It has my favorite crop growing there, so
no,
yes,
it
matters.
We can just move on. Anyway,
I love avocados,
thanks,
but
Mom.
I was thinking of
Mom.
oranges and all those other delicious things.
That's
okay,
Florida.
thanks, Mom.
Come on now.